The dark of space pressed in on Captain Frank Hayes as he sat in the command chair of the human exploration vessel, the Constellation. His crew of 30 men and women moved quietly through the corridors, scanning the vast emptiness before them. This was humanity's first real mission beyond Earth orbit, and Frank felt the weight of that responsibility. The scanner officer, Lisa, suddenly sat forward. Her hands moved quickly across the control panel. "Captain, I have a signal. It is a distress call." Frank leaned forward. "Source." 3 million kilometers away. It is not human, sir. The signal pattern is different, advanced." The bridge went silent. Everyone looked at Frank. Protocol was clear. Unknown alien contact meant retreat to safe distance and report to Earth. No engagement, no risks. Frank stood up from his chair. Through the viewport, he could see the vast darkness of space. He thought of the people on that ship. Someone was dying out there. Someone was sending a signal because they needed help. "Set course for the signal," Frank said. His first officer, Captain Henry, turned in his seat. "Sir, this could be a trap. We do not know what is out there." "I know. Plot the course anyway," Frank said. The Constellation moved through space toward the distress signal. As they got closer, they saw it. A massive ship, at least 3 times the size of Frank's vessel, was caught in an asteroid field. The asteroid struck the alien ship again and again. Pieces of the hull broke away and fell into the darkness. Frank watched through the viewport. The ship's power systems were failing. He could see the explosions, could see the destruction happening in real time. "They will not survive the asteroids," Lisa said. "Their shields are down." "How long do they have?" Frank asked. "Maybe 10 minutes, maybe less." Frank made his decision. "Begin asteroid deflection procedures. Use our tractor beams to clear a path. Get rescue teams ready. We are going in." "Sir, if those asteroids hit us," started. "I know the risk, do it." The Constellation moved forward. Its tractor beams caught the large asteroids and pushed them away. Smaller rocks still struck the ship, but Frank ignored the alarms and the damage reports. He kept his eyes on the alien vessel. Minutes passed. The asteroid field was moving. The Constellation's shields flared as rocks hit them, but the ship held. Frank had learned to fly in Earth's worst weather. He had learned to keep moving when everything told him to stop. The Constellation pushed through to the alien ship. Frank ordered the docking clamps to lock on to the alien vessel's hull. There was a shudder as the 2 ships connected. Frank turned to his medical officer, Robert. "Send teams now. Anyone on that ship who can walk, anyone who is hurt, everyone comes to us." Robert nodded and moved quickly. Frank heard the sound of the airlock opening. He heard the first members of his crew moving into the alien ship. Then something happened. The asteroid field shifted again. The biggest asteroid of all came straight at both ships. "Brace," Frank shouted. The asteroid struck the alien ship. The impact was massive. Alarms screamed through the Constellation. The alien ship began to break apart. Frank realized that his ship would be destroyed too if he did not do something. He grabbed the manual controls and pulled hard. The Constellation ripped free from the alien vessel's hull. Behind them, the alien ship cracked open like an egg, but the impact threw both ships toward the nearest moon. They fell through space, burning as they entered the atmosphere. Frank fought the controls. His hands moved with perfect purpose. He knew how to land a crippled ship. He had done it before on Earth. The ground came up fast. Frank aimed for a flat plane on the moon's surface. The Constellation touched down hard, throwing everyone forward. Alarms screamed. Dust and smoke filled the air. For a moment, nothing moved. Then Frank pulled himself up. His crew was rising from their seats. Most of them were alive. "Status report," Frank said. "Check the panels. Hull is damaged. We can repair. We can get home, but not fast." "The alien ship?" Frank asked. "Behind us also crashed, maybe 2 kilometers away." Frank made his way to the airlock. Lisa was already there, checking the status. "Captain, we have 63 survivors from their ship. They came through our airlock before impact." That was the name of the race. Frank had not known before. Now he knew. 63 aliens were on his ship, and he was on their world's moon. Frank moved through the corridors of his ship. They were tall, with silver skin and eyes that looked like polished metal. They held weapons, but they had not fired them. They watched the humans move around them with great interest. Frank stopped in front of the tallest. This one wore different clothing than the others, clothes that showed authority and power. "I am Captain Frank Hayes of the Human Exploration Vessel Constellation," Frank said. "Your ship is damaged. My ship is damaged. We are both stuck here. We can fight or we can work together to survive. What will it be?" They looked at Frank for a long moment. Then slowly they lowered their weapon. "I am Commander Thane of the fleet," the alien said. His voice was like metal grinding together, but the meaning was clear. "I accept your offer. We will work together." Frank nodded. He turned to his crew. "We have work to do. Let us save everyone on this moon, human, and let us show them what we are made of." The work began. Humans and moved together through the crash sites. They pulled the injured from the wreckage. They fixed what could be fixed. They worked through the long lunar day without rest. As the sun set, Frank stood at the edge of a ridge, looking out at the alien ship. A figure approached him. It was but not like the others. The clothing was different. The bearing was different. There was something about this one that made Frank stop and turn. They walked toward him slowly. When she spoke, her voice was like crystal bells. "I am Princess. I wanted to tell you that you saved my life today. My people have never experienced such kindness from an inferior species. I will not forget this," she said. Frank looked at her. In her metal eyes, he saw something he had not expected to find among aliens. He saw a person. He saw someone who understood what he had done and why. "You are welcome, Princess," Frank said. Neither of them knew it yet, but in that moment their worlds had changed forever. 3 weeks had passed since the crash. The moon base had become a place of cooperation between two worlds. The ship's repair crews worked alongside human engineers. The soldiers trained together with human soldiers. For the first time in either species' history, they were learning from each other. Frank was fixing a power conduit when a shadow fell across his work. He looked up and saw Princess. She wore simple working clothes instead of her formal dress. Her metal eyes reflected the light. "Captain Hayes, I would like to show you something," said, "if you have time." Frank set down his tools. "I have time." Led him away from the base, up a high ridge that overlooked the lunar plain. The earth hung in the black sky above them, blue and white and beautiful. Stopped and turned to Frank. "On Valor, my world, the sky is always red. The sun is too hot for comfort. Everything is controlled. Every moment of every day is planned for me. The only time I see the real sky is when I escape to the observation gardens. I have looked at this earth in your sky every night since we crashed. It is peaceful," said. Frank stood beside her, looking at the distant earth. "It is beautiful. In our civilization, beauty has no value. Power has value. Control has value. Resources have value. But beauty, kindness, these things are considered weakness by my people," said. Frank turned to face her. "On my world, those things are what make life worth living." His metal eyes turned to look at him directly. "That is why you risked your ship to save us. Why you worked beside us without demanding payment. Why you shared your food with the injured, even when your own stores were low." "Yes," Frank said simply. "My father, the Emperor, will not understand this. He will see it as foolishness. He already has messages waiting for me on Valor. He demands to know why I am communicating with humans, why I allow my soldiers to work as equals with inferior species. He does not see you as you are," said. "What do you see?" Frank asked. Looked back at the earth. "I see people who choose to do what is right instead of what is safe. I see a captain who broke protocol to save strangers. I see a man who could have taken advantage of my people's weakened state, but instead offered his hand in friendship. I see something my world has forgotten. Over the next week, found reasons to spend time with Frank. She would visit the repair areas while he worked. She would ask him questions about Earth, about his family, about why humans acted the way they did. Frank had a family photo with him, a small piece of paper with his sister and parents on it. Studied it carefully. "These are your blood relatives?" she asked. "Yes, my sister Corinne. My mother, my father William, I miss them," Frank said. "You would die for them?" asked. "Without question," Frank said. "On Valor I have no such bonds. My brother was raised in a different palace. We have not seen each other in 5 years. My parents are the Emperor and Empress, but they do not see me as a daughter. They see me as a future ruler, a piece to move on the galactic board," said. Frank could hear the pain in her words. "You are more than that. Anyone who knows you can see it." Moved closer to him. "The other suitors my father has chosen for me, they see my title and my power. They see the resources the throne controls. They smile and speak empty words, but you listen to me. You ask me what I think, not what I am commanded to think. When I made that joke yesterday about the food processor, you laughed. Your laugh was real, not forced." "That is because you are funny," Frank said, and he found himself smiling. Smiled too, and for a moment, Frank could almost forget that she was from another world, that she was alien in every physical way. The day came when the ships were nearly repaired. The crew was preparing to leave. Frank watched as supplies were loaded onto the rebuilt vessel. This was the end of the cooperation between their peoples. Soon would be gone. Frank found her in the lunar gardens they had created together, a small space where they had planted seeds from Earth. Was looking at the small green shoots that were beginning to grow. "On my world nothing grows like this. The sun is too strong, the earth is too bitter, but here your plants are thriving," said. "Life is strong when it is not afraid to grow in new places," Frank said. Turned to him. "I do not wish to go back. The Galactic Council is waiting for me. My father is waiting. They will demand I explain my time with you. They will demand I stop seeing you as a person and start seeing you as part of a negotiation." "Then we have limited time," Frank said. "We have only tomorrow," said, "before we leave for Valor, one last day." They spent that day walking together on the lunar surface. They talked about everything. They talked about their dreams, about their fears, about the pressure of duty that both of them felt. Told Frank about the suitors waiting for her on Valor, men and women from the most powerful species in the galaxy. All of them wanted to marry her for her power, not for her. "I have never had a choice about who I spend my time with. Everything has been decided for me since birth. My teachers, my friends, my future husband, my role in the government. Every choice has been made by my father," said. "You have a choice now," Frank said. "I do, but if I choose you, I lose everything. My position, my family, my world. The court would never accept a union with a human. I would be exiled. I would lose the throne," said. "I know," Frank said. "So the choice is yours alone. Whatever you decide, I will accept it." That night they stood together on the ridge, looking at the earth and the sky. They did not touch. They did not need to. In that moment, something had changed between them. Something fundamental had shifted, and both of them felt it. Tomorrow would board her ship and return to Valor. She would return to her father and her duty and her arranged future. But something inside her had awakened. Something that could not be put back to sleep. And Frank knew that he would never be the same again, returned to Valor. The journey back took 3 weeks of fast travel through space. During that time, she received 17 messages from her father. Each one was more angry than the last. When her ship landed at the Imperial Palace, the Emperor was waiting. His silver skin looked cold in the artificial light. His eyes, the same polished metal as his daughter's, were full of rage. "You have embarrassed this family," the Emperor said before had even left the landing platform. You spent 3 weeks working beside humans, inferior creatures who have barely left their own planet. You have allowed them to think they are equal too. You have damaged the standing of the throne. Kept her voice level. I saved humans, and together, I learned that they are not inferior, Father. They are different but not inferior. The Emperor's hand struck the metal wall and the sound echoed through the chamber. You will cease all communication with this human immediately. You will not speak of him again. You will focus on your duties as heir to the throne. There are suitors waiting to meet you. The Lord of the dynasty is here. The Prince of the royal family is waiting. These are the matches that will strengthen our empire. I do not care about strengthening the empire through marriage. I care about my own choice, said. The silence that followed was absolute. No one in the history of the throne had ever spoken to the emperor this way. Could feel the shock radiating from everyone in the room. You forget your place, the emperor said quietly. You are not a person. You are a symbol of power. You exist to serve the throne, not to serve yourself. I am giving you one final warning. End this human affair or lose your position as heir. Walked away from her father. She would not stand there and defend Frank anymore. It was clear that no argument would reach the Emperor's mind. Meanwhile, on the human station orbiting Earth, Frank received official communication from High Command. The message was clear and direct. He was forbidden from any further contact with Princess. The Empire was prepared to cut off all diplomatic relations with humanity if Frank did not comply with this order. Frank's commanding officer, Admiral Turner, called him into his office. The Admiral looked tired and old, as if the weight of this diplomatic crisis had aged him. Frank, I do not give you these orders lightly. The Empire controls half the known galaxy. If they cut off relations with us now, it could set humanity back 50 years. We need this alliance more than we need anything else. You need to agree to end contact with the princess, Admiral Turner said. Sir, I understand the stakes, Frank said. Do you? Because it does not sound like it. Every day you show up at work is another day they could use as evidence that you are defying their orders. Every message you send to the princess is one more reason for them to withdraw diplomatic recognition. Your personal feelings do not matter here, Frank. Humanity matters. Our survival in this galaxy matters, Admiral Turner said. Frank felt the weight of those words. He knew the Admiral was right. He knew that his love for was putting billions of humans at risk. He thought about Earth, about his sister Corinne and his parents. He thought about all the children who might suffer if war came between humans, and because he could not let her go. That night Frank sent a message to. It took hours for him to write it. He deleted it and rewrote it dozens of times. Finally, he just spoke the truth. I cannot continue to contact you. It is putting my people at risk. The Empire is threatening to cut off all relations with humanity if I do not comply with their order. I will not be the reason that billions of humans suffer. I know you face pressure from your father. I know you are suffering as much as I am. But I cannot ask you to sacrifice everything for someone you have only known a few weeks. My duty to humanity has to come first. I am sorry. I will always remember the time we spent together. You changed my life. You made me believe that connection between our peoples is possible. I am sorry I could not be brave enough to see it through. I release you from any feelings you have for me. Find a path that makes you happy. That is what I want for you most of all. The message went across the vast distances of space. Frank knew that when it arrived, it would hurt. It would hurt her deeply. But he told himself it was the right thing to do. He told himself he was protecting her. When received the message, she sat alone in her chamber for hours. Her handmaidens asked if she was sick. She would not answer them. Frank's words cut deeper than any weapon could. He was right. She had known him for only a few weeks. He was right that her place was on valor, that her duty was to her people and her throne. He was right about all of it. But he was also wrong about something. He was wrong about the strength it took to love someone. He was wrong about the courage required to choose a person over duty. At the same moment, Frank was in his quarters, telling himself that letting her go was the noble choice, was in hers, realizing that she had spent her entire life doing what was expected of her. She had followed orders since birth. She had accepted the paths others laid out for her. And she was tired of it. Stood up and walked to her mirror. The silver face looking back at her was the face of a princess, the face of a future empress, the face of a ruler who had everything except the freedom to choose her own life. She made a decision that night. She did not know if it was brave or foolish. She only knew that she could not go back to being a symbol. She could not marry a suitor chosen by her father. She could not live a life decided by others, even if it meant losing everything. The next morning sent a message to Frank. She did not ask for his permission or his approval. She simply told him what she had decided to do. When the message arrived, Frank read it 3 times before he believed it was real. Then he understood that the choice he thought he had made, the noble sacrifice he thought he was making, meant nothing. Had made her choice too, and her choice was him, walked into the grand assembly hall of the palace. Every member of the High Council was present. The emperor sat on his throne, looking down at his daughter with cold metal eyes. The assembled nobility watched her approach, whispers moving through the crowd like a spreading disease. Had requested this assembly. In tradition, any member of the royal family could address the council directly. Her father had expected her to make some announcement about which suitor she had chosen. He had expected her to finally obey his will. He was not prepared for what came next. Stood in the center of the chamber. Her voice was clear and loud, and every word was broadcast throughout the empire. "I have called this assembly to make a statement about my future," said. "For my entire life I have done what was expected of me. I learned what I was told to learn. I became what I was told to become. I never questioned the path laid out for me, but something has changed. Something in me has awakened." The emperor stood up from his throne. "This is not the time for speeches. Make your choice of suitor." "That is exactly what I am doing," continued. "I am choosing. The lord of the dynasty wants to marry my title and my power. The prince of the royal family wants to marry my bloodline and my resources. None of them want to marry me. None of them see me as a person." She turned to face the assembled council directly. "But there is someone who does. There is someone from a species our culture has called primitive. Someone from a world we thought was inferior. Someone who risked his own life to save mine without knowing anything about me. Captain Frank Hayes of humanity." The assembly erupted. Some laughed. Some stood up in anger. The emperor's voice boomed across the chamber. "You are making a fool of yourself and your throne. Sit down." "No," said. "I will not sit down. I will not be silent anymore. I will tell you what I have learned about humans in the time I spent with them. I learned that they define themselves not by power but by character. They measure their worth not in military strength but in the strength of their bonds to each other. They act with kindness not because it will benefit them but because kindness is right. This is something our civilization has forgotten." "They are inferior," the emperor shouted. "Their technology is primitive. Their civilization is young. They have no place in the galactic order." "They are not inferior. They are different," said. "And that difference is what makes their example so valuable. On my crash landing with Captain Hayes, I learned what it means to value life above resources. I learned what sacrifice truly is. I learned what it means to be human in the deepest sense of that word." Took a breath. This was the moment. This was the point where she would lose everything if she spoke the next words. "I choose Captain Frank Hayes," said. "I choose a human. I choose love over power. I choose my own path over the path chosen for me. And if this means I am no longer worthy of the throne, then I accept that consequence." The silence that followed was profound. Then slowly the whispers began again. But they were different now. They were not mocking. They were fascinated. In the back of the assembly hall, a young noblewoman named Sarah stood up. Then another, a military commander named Victor, stood beside her. Then others began to stand. Not the old guard, not the advisors who had served the emperor for centuries, but the younger generation of those who had grown up learning about different cultures, who had always felt confined by the rigid rules of the empire. They stood in silence, not cheering but standing. It was a sign of respect in culture. It meant acknowledgement. It meant approval. The emperor looked at his daughter with something close to disgust. "You are no longer my daughter. You are no longer heir to the throne. You are exiled from valor. You are exiled from the palace and from my sight. Get out." Did not cry, she did not beg forgiveness. She simply turned and walked from the chamber. As she passed the younger who stood in support of her, she felt a strange sense of peace. She had lost the throne. She had lost her title. She had lost her family. But she had gained something infinitely more valuable. She had gained her own life. When Frank received the news, he did not celebrate. He felt only deep sorrow for what had sacrificed. He received a private message from her that evening. "I have done what I needed to do," the message read. "I have spoken my truth. I have lost my father, my throne, my entire world, and I have never felt more free in my life. Now I understand what you were protecting when you told me to let you go. You were protecting your people, but I realized that my people need me more than I need a throne. They need to see that change is possible. They need to see that someone from their own world had the courage to choose differently. My father calls this a betrayal. I call it love. I am leaving Valor for the last time. My ship will arrive at Earth in 10 weeks. I hope you will be waiting." The message went across the vast darkness of space, and Frank read it over and over, each time understanding more fully the magnitude of what had done. On Valor, the ripples of choice spread outward. The younger generation began to question the rigid structures of their society. Some began to advocate for change. The galactic media picked up the story of the princess who had chosen love over power, who had chosen a human over her own throne. For some, it was a scandal. For others, particularly the young and the hopeful, it was a revolution. The old emperor looked from his chamber window at the stars. He had won. His daughter was gone. The throne was secure. His rules were unchanged. But he felt something he had not felt in a long time. He felt afraid that his daughter might be right, afraid that his empire, so strong and so perfect, might be incomplete in ways he had never wanted to admit. Afraid that the future had just changed forever, Frank stood on the landing platform as ship descended through Earth's atmosphere. The sky lit up with the heat of re-entry, and Frank watched as the vessel slowly came to rest. For weeks, he had waited for this moment. For weeks, he had lived in a state between hope and fear. When the landing ramp lowered, walked down, she wore simple human clothes, nothing like the formal robes of a princess. Behind her came 5 guards, but they were there to protect her, not to carry her authority. Frank walked forward and stood in front of her. For a moment, they did not speak. They simply looked at each other, seeing fully for the first time what they had sacrificed and what they had gained. "I gave up a throne," said. "I know," Frank said. "I gave up my family. I gave up my world. I gave up everything," said. "I know," Frank said again. "Do you know why?" asked. "Because you chose yourself. Because you chose your own life," Frank said. Shook her head. "No, I chose you. I chose us. I chose to believe that love and connection matter more than power. That was worth everything." Frank reached out and took her hand. On Earth, this was a simple gesture. Among, it was an act of profound trust. His metal skin was warm to the touch. The media descended on them almost immediately. The story of the princess and the captain had already captivated the world. Human news crews, broadcasters, and journalists from a dozen other species all wanted to know what would happen next. Frank decided to do something radical. Instead of hiding, instead of waiting for the politicians to figure out how to handle their situation, They decided to use their story for something larger. With Admiral Turner's reluctant approval, Frank and began a series of diplomatic missions. They traveled to worlds that had been isolated from each other. They showed that communication was possible. They demonstrated that species with nothing in common could find common ground. On the world where the inhabitants were purely logical, explained the mathematics of emotion. She showed how love, despite seeming illogical, followed patterns and rules just like anything else. She showed that connection could be measured and valued. On the where tradition was everything, Frank demonstrated that honoring tradition did not mean never changing. He showed that the bravest tradition was the willingness to grow. On smaller worlds, on isolated stations, and in distant outposts, Frank and became symbols of something new. They became proof that the galaxy did not have to be divided into powerful and powerless, dominant and submissive, civilized and primitive. They became proof that connection was possible. 6 months after arrived on Earth, Frank took her to a place on the planet's surface. It was a small farm in a region called Colorado, where the air was clean and the sky was open. They stood on a hill and looked out at the vast landscape. Frank reached into his pocket. What he pulled out was simple. It was a ring he had made himself from silver metal and a single stone from the moon where they had first met. There were no precious metals. There was no great wealth or power displayed in the ring. It was just something he had made with his own hands. Frank said, "I know you gave up a throne, I know you gave up everything. I can never give you back what you lost, but I can offer you something my people value. I can offer you a choice that is truly free. Will you marry me? Will you stay with me on Earth and build a life together?" Looked at the ring. She looked at Frank's face, so full of hope and fear. She thought about the throne she had given up. She thought about her father, the emperor, sitting in his palace on a distant world. She thought about the life she had been born to live. Then she said yes. They were married in a ceremony that both humans and attended. It was not a political alliance. It was not a statement about galactic peace, though it served that purpose too. It was simply two people choosing each other. Years passed. The human alliance grew stronger, not because of treaties or strategic calculations, but because of what Frank and had shown the galaxy. Change was possible. Connection was possible. The future did not have to be written by the past. Gave birth to a daughter. The child was half human and half, a living symbol of what could happen when species learned to trust each other. The emperor never acknowledged his grandchild. He refused to speak to his daughter, but that did not matter. Had found something far more valuable than a throne. She had found a life of her own choosing. On a night many years later, Frank and stood on a hill in Colorado, just as they had when Frank asked her to marry him. Their daughter, now a teenager, was sleeping in the house behind them. In the distance, they could hear the sounds of the small community they had built, a place where humans lived and worked together. "I was thinking," said, "about what my father told me all those years ago. He said that true power comes from control and dominance, that resources and military strength were the only things that mattered." "Was he right?" Frank asked. "No," said, "true power comes from choice. Real value is not in what you control, but in who you love and who loves you back. The greatest prize is not wealth or military might or a throne. The greatest prize is finding someone who sees you as you truly are and chooses to stand beside you anyway." Frank wrapped his arm around her. In the distance, the stars shone down on them, the same stars that had looked down on two broken ships crashing to a distant moon. The same stars that had watched as an alien princess chose a human captain. The same stars that would watch as two worlds, once strangers, learned to see each other as friends. In the empire that had left behind, things were changing. The younger generation inspired by her example, were beginning to question the ways of their ancestors. They were reaching out to other species. They were learning that strength did not mean isolation. They were discovering that connection did not mean weakness. The emperor grew old in his palace, and the throne eventually passed to a new heir. The new ruler was younger and more willing to consider change. Diplomatic relations between and humans grew stronger. But never went home. Her home was on Earth now, in the Colorado hills, with Frank and their daughter and the community they had built. She had given up a throne but gained a family. In the end, that was worth infinitely more. The prize was never wealth. The prize was never power. The prize for a woman was the man who loved her for who she truly was, and the prize for that man was the woman who had the courage to choose him. Everything else was just details. Two people had changed the course of history by doing something simple. They had chosen love. They had chosen connection. They had chosen each other. And in doing so, they had shown the galaxy something it had forgotten, that the greatest strength is not in weapons or power. The greatest strength is in the choice to love.